Hello everyone, this is Rick Wallen here. This is the 5th episode in my new but not so new podcast series, and today I'm joined by Ryotaro Aoki of Japanese-based band Looprider. Here's what's to come. Did you like Nirvana then? I suppose you did. Who didn't?
Yeah, so that was kind of like this. It was this mind-blowing experience for me as a teenager. I had never heard anything like that before. I guess it's like when people come to Japan for the first time from another country. I kind of have that kind of view of Japan. It's neon and robots and
Me too.
cool
Yeah.
stuff. And
I'm not a weebo though, like Dave said. So thanks for coming on, Ryotaro. I hope I've pronounced your name correctly.
that's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
So you're the founding member of Looprider, would you say?
Yes.
It started
Yes.
out as was it like a solo project, and then you kind of recruited people?
Yeah, originally it was just by myself. It was I sort of envisioned it as kind of like a like a Nine Inch Nails thing where I would have a different band for each album or whatever.
Yeah.
Was the original idea, and then kind of along the way I met people, and then some people were keen for it to become kind of like a more of a group.
Mm.
And then it kind of became a group, and then people kind of came and went, and then ultimately, I guess now it is kind of like what I originally envisioned it. But I like to think the lineup I have now is, ideally we keep this lineup going as long as possible. But yeah, so it is my band. At this point, I think I like to consider it as a band with the three people, including myself, who are currently part of it. But yes, originally it kind of started out just me back in like 2012 or 13 or something like that. So I've been doing this for like maybe seven years or something like that.
And what about? Would you mind talking about like growing up in the States? You said you grew up in the States up until you were about in high school. What was it like? Whereabouts did you grow up? In the States?
Right. I moved to the States when I was about 1 year old, because of my parents' job. So my father got a transfer to the States, and then kind of the whole family went.
Mm-hmm.
And originally we were supposed to be there for like, I don't know, like a couple of years or something like that. I guess it was like an assignment kind of thing. But then
Yes.
the third year came and we didn't go back, and then the fourth year came and we didn't go back, and then he just kind of, we just stayed there. And before we knew it, I think I was there until I was about 14 or 15. And then originally we lived in Ohio, kind of like the Midwest. That's kind of where I learned English. But then we moved to the South. So Tennessee, we kind of moved in a couple different states, but it was mostly in the southern part of the U.S. So very different from Tokyo.
Oh yes, definitely.
Not so much underground music going on either in Tennessee. But yeah, it was nice. It was kind of very typical suburban American upbringing, I guess. It was a good place to grow up, I think.
So your parents are Japanese, is that right?
Yes, my parents are Japanese, yeah. So I'm Japanese as well.
Yeah. Did you learn to speak Japanese as well as English then, as you were growing up?
Yeah, so I went to Japanese school on Saturdays.
Mm-hmm.
So there was like a lot of areas in America they have like a Japanese community, and the one in Tennessee it was centralized in this town, and all the Japanese kids from the state would go there every Saturday, and we would do basically a week's worth of Japanese education in a couple hours. So that's where I learned Japanese. I hated it. I hated going there, but I'm glad my parents, kind of made me.
Why did you hate it? if you don't
But you
mind.
know, it's just, I mean, on the weekdays I was in I was in American
Oh, okay.
culture,
Yeah.
the American school system, right? And
Yeah.
then to me the whole Japanese thing was very foreign. I didn't really understand um the language as well as I do now. And so kind of going, it was very how should I put it? You're like you do okay in school on the weekdays, but then you go to this other school
Yeah.
where you have no idea what's going on, and then
No
so
idea what.
your
Yeah.
confidence, yeah, takes a hit,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
so I didn't really enjoy going to it. And then also because most of the kids who were there, the Japanese kids, most of them were there for like maybe like 2 or 3 years at most, and so they were kind of fresh from Japan, so
Oh, I
um,
see.
they were just kind of there temporarily, whereas kind of my family were there like the whole time. And so those kids kind of knew, what was hip, what was going on in Japan. And then, this was like pre-internet, of course, so I didn't have any of that information. And
Okay.
so, yeah, it was kind of, you know, the the kids would be like, "Oh, you don't know, blah blah blah's going on in Japan. You don't know this cool stuff is happening," and that sort of thing.
So you didn't really fit
Uh,
in. You felt like, yeah, you felt like left out, I suppose, like, separate from those kids who were already kind of acclimatized to Japanese culture and the language and stuff.
yeah, a little bit, but I mean, I see from their perspective now, they probably had a hard time, you know, the other 5 days of the week because they were in a foreign country and they
Mm.
probably didn't know what was going on
Yeah.
more days of the week than I did. So I kind of I understand where they were coming from, but
Mm.
at the time, yeah, it was just like, why do I need to go? Like, I didn't envision myself um ever coming back to Japan
Mm.
when I was a kid, so I didn't really understand why I had to do that. But
Mm.
now, obviously I'm here now, so I'm very happy that I did. And then yeah, at home, it was Japanese. Like my parents made sure they spoke to me in Japanese, and we had Japanese culture kind of happening in the house. Um, so yeah, so I'd say that's where I picked up a lot of Japanese as well, just being at home.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, what kind of music were you listening to, like, when you were younger? Do you remember the first kind of stuff you were getting into and what you liked initially?
Yeah, so my family was we were a fairly musical family, I suppose. Um, so there was always kind of music playing in the house. My dad played guitar.
Mm.
So there was a guitar in the house. There's this acoustic guitar, which I was never allowed to really touch.
Yeah.
It's kind of this,
Yeah.
sacred thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so my parents were listening to a lot of music. My dad was really into, he was kind of, my parents both, they were born kind of late 50s. So, um, my dad was really into um, like 70s rock, to like Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, uh, lots of Clapton. And then kind of, I guess when he was younger, it was kind of the whole like yacht rock thing.
Mm.
So there
Mm.
was a lot of that stuff kind of playing in the house.
Yeah.
Um, and then my mom was into kind of, I guess, Japanese, it would be like Japanese city pop.
Mm.
So a lot of that was playing in the house and also like in the car. So that's kind of where um, my music education, I suppose, got started.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a lot of like the Beatles, obviously, like a lot of that stuff was kind of playing. Um, and so I was listening to that. And then me growing up in the 90s, a lot of it was, just like American radio.
Oh,
So
okay.
At the time, you had like light pop stations that were they were playing like I don't know like Fleetwood Mac and like um, other like yacht rock stuff from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it was kind of like lots of crossover pop. So um, I don't know, American radio at the time, it was like you would have like Fleetwood Mac, and then they would be playing like I don't know, like No Doubt or like
Oh yeah, yeah.
Foo Fighters or something like that.
Skunk and Nancy.
So it's kind of yeah,
Do you
yeah.
remember Skunk and Nancy? They're great. I used to love them. Well, still do, but
So
doing
it's
that.
kind of like all this like jumbled together, right?
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I guess, I don't know how it was like in the UK at the time, like, but
Yeah, I think it was we had the whole Britpop thing in the 90s. So
right,
like Oasis, Stone Roses, the Smiths. So I was hearing a lot of that really when I was growing up. So and then obviously Radiohead, because Radiohead really were started out like kind of like a Britpop band, and they were that kind of classic. They had that kind of similar sound to Oasis, but then obviously once they released Kid A and like OK Computer, that's when they kind of moved away from that completely and revolutionized the sound. But yeah, that's the kind of stuff I was listening to. But did you start, when did you start actually like playing some music? Did you, like you say there was a guitar but you couldn't really touch it, and did you start playing in bands? Because you must have moved, you said you moved back to Japan when you was in high school, did you say?
yeah. So I moved when I was like 14 or 15 back to Japan. Excuse me, and but I started playing guitar when I was 13, I think.
Hmm.
And then before then, I had been playing piano. My mother um, had insisted that I play piano. But I never really got into piano, so I just know kind of like the very basic stuff, right?
Hmm.
Like a couple scales and chords and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so there was a guitar in the house, and um, I was I always wanted to kind of see what guitar was all about, and so I kept asking my parents, can I get a guitar? Can I take lessons, or can I start playing guitar? And um, they kept on telling me no, 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 no for I don't know why, but they wouldn't let me play. But then finally, when I was 13, they said okay,
Hmm.
and so they got me my first guitar. And
Do,
then
do
I
you
started
remember
taking
what
lessons.
it was? What type of guitar it was?
It,
The make and
it
model?
was a Stratocaster,
Okay.
yeah. So just like a regular sunburst, like so. I think so. My dad took me to I think uh, I think it was called Mars Music. It's kind of like Guitar Center, I guess. And
Okay. Yeah.
so we went, and he picked, like the basic, like the cheapest one. And it was like a Sunburst Stratocaster.
Yeah.
And I think he got that because he's a big Clapton fan, and he was like, if
He
you're
was
gonna
drawn
get a
to that.
guitar,
Yeah.
you should get a Stratocaster. So obviously, I didn't know what a Stratocaster was at the time, but I was like, oh, I've seen that kind of shape before.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the one that we ended up getting. So yeah, that's when I started playing guitar. Um, and I started taking lessons as well. And I also had a friend who had just started playing guitar maybe like a couple months before me. And so he was kind of a little bit ahead of me.
Hmm.
Um, but he kind of taught me a couple things. Um, Mostly it was just like Green Day songs at the beginning, right? So just like
Oh,
power
okay.
chords, stuff like
Barcodes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, that's how I got started. And then, um, yeah, at the time, in terms of the music I was listening to, it was just like all the stuff that was popular at the time. So, it was like early 2000s. So, like in the US, um, lots of like pop punk stuff, and then also there was a lot of like the whole new metal thing was happening,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
I got
so it was
into that.
just
Yeah.
yeah, there was a lot of like guitar music going on. So just kind of listening to that, and then just whatever was on the radio. I wasn't really kind of super into anything in particular.
Mm,
But then as I started playing guitar, I started discovering more guitar oriented music. Um,
mm.
so yeah, that's kind of how I got started.
So, what kind of I mean, what kind of stuff were you playing? You say like kind of Green Day and that, but did you kind of?
Yeah,
I was just going to ask you actually. Did you like any kind of the kind of punk stuff? Like you saying Green Day, but like maybe more the hardcore stuff. Were you into that at all? Like Fugazi or Minor Threat or
uh,
the
not
DC
exactly
punk?
at the not exactly at the time. That around the time that's when I started discovering that sort of thing. Um, we had some punks on the school bus, and they had some CDs of like at first it was like NoFX and Bad Religion,
Oh yeah, yeah.
um, and then kind of more skate punk type of stuff.
Skate punk, yeah.
And so I started getting into that music through them. Um, and then later on, I did discover kind of Bad Brains and Black Flag and all that other stuff. But yeah, when I started playing guitar, I didn't really know any of that. It was just kind of what was kind of going on
Mm,
at
mm,
the time.
yeah.
And then yeah, so I was playing uh, like Green Day stuff, and then I was also taking lessons very briefly. And at the beginning, it was like like traditional folk songs and like country songs like "You're My Sunshine" and "Country Road" and stuff like that. Like super
Yeah,
easy stuff
yeah, yeah,
just to get started.
yeah.
Um, but my teacher he gave me this tape that had some songs on it. It was I guess it was like songs for beginners basically. And the first track on the cassette tape that he gave me was Nirvana, "Smells Like Teen Spirit,"
Oh great, yeah.
and
Completely
that was
forgot. I
kind of
completely
like the
forgot about them. I mean, that was the kind of because we're gonna obviously get to what your band like. I suppose like the whole grunge thing. I suppose Nirvana, what you would say would be the kind of fathers of grunge or whatever. But then you also had like Jesus Lizard and that. But
yeah.
did you like Nirvana then? I suppose you did. Who didn't?
Yeah, so that was kind of like this. It was this mind blowing experience for me
Mm,
as a teenager. Um, I had never heard anything like that before, um, and so and then also my I also had the tab for the song because my teacher had kind of given them to me like handwritten tabs or whatever,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and so kind of I was hearing this kind of amazing sound, and then I could also kind of visually register it with, oh, like I can actually play this, like it's not that hard. Um, and so that kind of really hit me, I think, in a certain way.
Yeah,
Um, that just kind of started this whole other thing. The timing was sort of perfect as well because there was a lot of renewed interest in Nirvana at the time then. I think
mm,
like the greatest hits had come out. Um, and the Foo Fighters were becoming like a huge band, and Dave Grohl had done stuff with like Queens of the Stone. It was all kind of like this big thing like happening at the same time, and so I got really into it. Um, yeah, so they instantly became my favorite band, and I just started to kind of go through comb the internet for information on them, and then what they were into, what they
yeah,
stood for, the bands that
yeah.
they liked, and that kind of just opened this whole
What did you
world.
think about Kurt Cobain? Did you kind of idolize him like a lot of people did? I mean, I suppose
Yeah,
after he died, people it was more of like a martyrdom sort of thing, you know. Like I think that changed everything. But what did you think of Kurt Cobain?
oh yeah, definitely. I think there was a time in my life where he was a big idol of mine.
Mm,
Um, I do. I At the time though, I think I really wanted to, you know, I think as a curious young teenager, I wanted to really kind of understand what they were all about. I didn't want to just kind of, you know, uh, I felt there was more than just the whole tortured rock star kind of icon
Mm,
thing.
mm,
I felt there was kind of more there. And so I tried to read a lot of stuff about the band and kind of, download bootlegs and just kind of understand the trajectory and everything. Um, and then that ultimately led me to Sonic Youth and then the Melvins. And then that kind of started this whole thing of kind of underground music for me. Um,
that was
so yeah,
the gateway to the your current project, Looprider. It started
yeah, for
with,
sure.
yeah.
Definitely, yeah.
What was it? So I wanted to ask you, when you moved, because you moved back to Japan, I suppose at that age, was it quite intense? I mean, that's a kind of formative years, isn't it? Really, like 15, 15, 16. Or was it? Were you happy when you moved and you settled in? Okay.
Yeah, at the time, so I would come to Japan for like a couple weeks, like every couple years, during the summer to see relatives and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, so I had this very, um, it was like it was summer vacation. I had this kind of summer vacation Disneyland version of Japan in my mind. And
Yeah.
so when I found out we were moving back, I was actually pretty stoked about it because, Japan was just kind of this awesome place where I guess it's like when people come to Japan for the first time from another country. I kind of have that kind of view of Japan. It's neon and robots and you
Me
know
too. Me too,
cool
man.
cool
Yeah.
stuff and
I'm not a weebo though, like Dave said. Yeah, not that far.
yeah. So yeah, I kind of I had this utopian version of Japan in my mind. Um, and so actually coming here, I didn't have any reservations about it, but then actually, settling in and starting to live here,
Mm,
uh, it was, um, yeah, it was challenging, I think.
mm,
Um, and
definitely.
I mean, I don't want to say it was like horrible or anything like that. I understand, like, I'm in a very privileged position, but yeah, I think it was an interesting time for sure. Um, because, if you've been here, um, most people here don't speak English.
Yeah,
Um, and so kind of looking Japanese and then being able to speak English, it is kind of it's a weird experience, I guess. And then couple that with the fact that I was into, Sonic Youth and, 80s hardcore.
yeah,
When at the time what was popular was even in rock, in mainstream rock, it was like, Blink 182 and like Sum 41, and those bands were really popular even
mm,
in Japan as well. So like coming over and saying, oh, I'm going to start a band like Sonic Youth,
yeah,
to my schoolmates when most of them had no idea who Sonic Youth were.
yeah.
uh, so that was, um, I don't want to say frustrating, but um, yeah, it was interesting at the time in Japan. A lot of that sort of pop punk stuff. Japan had its own kind of movement of melodic hardcore pop punk in the early 2000s, and so that stuff was really popular at the time. And then we call it like mixture rock here, but it's like rap rock. Like a lot of that stuff was going on at the time.
Right.
So all the kids who wanted to be in bands wanted to play that sort of stuff, whereas I wanted to, you know, um, take drumsticks and throw them on my guitars and
Yeah.
make noise and
Kick
stuff
over
like that.
the drum set and smash up
Yeah,
the amps and stuff like that. A lot of the bands, they were singing in Japanese, not English. So the stuff you were
uh,
listening to, they obviously they sing in English, don't they? Like Sonic Youth and that. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the stuff that was popular here at the time, it was very well. at the time, especially like punk or pop punk in Japan, I think at the time, it was a transitional period. A lot of bands had been singing in English, or they were trying to sing in English,
Oh, okay.
and then um, kind of later on, singing in Japanese became more of a thing. But yeah, like yeah, most of the bands that were popular were singing in Japanese, whereas I was listening to a lot of English stuff. That's not to say that I wasn't into Japanese music,
Mm.
because I had grown up with a lot of J-pop, like before I played guitar, through like watching like recording, like videotape recordings that we got from people in the community of, like top shows like Top of the Pops ish kind of, J-pop programs would be on these tapes, and I
Oh,
would I
okay.
would go through it. So that was another big part of my kind of musical education, I guess.
Mm.
But yeah, when by the time I did come back to Japan, it was all to me, like I was all about, you know, grunge and hardcore and stuff like that. So
Yeah. And so at this point, did you start to go to shows and stuff? I mean, kind of that this will be after high school. Did you start going to like gigs and shows and starting playing in a few bands? Was this,
yeah,
yeah.
so I played in bands in high school, but they were mostly like cover bands. So we would play like I would force like the bands I was playing with to play like a Nirvana song, or like Metallica or something like that.
Mm, mm.
Uh, whereas where most the other kids wanted to play like Japanese rock basically. So that was kind of the extent of my kind of my band experience in high school. Um, and in terms of gigs, though, I did start going to gigs maybe like the second or third year, the last year of high school. So Sonic Youth had come to town,
Oh,
um,
great.
for I think it was Sonic Nurse. They were with Jim O'Rourke for that show, I think. So I went to go see that, um, and that was another kind of big formative experience for me, because the opening band for that show was this Japanese band called Afri-Rampo,
Okay.
um, who are a two-piece. They're kind of psych rock, garage rock, just kind of two women just going nuts on guitar and drums.
Sounds great.
Uh,
I like it already.
yeah, so they were kind of a thing in the early 2000s in Japan, kind of post-Boredom's generation, I
Mm,
guess.
mm.
Um, and so that show really kind of really got me hooked onto the whole Japanese underground community.
Mm.
Um,
So you were
so
so what part of you were living in Tokyo, I assume. What part of Tokyo and where were the kind of shows usually taking place?
so I was living in Tokyo, and then a lot of the shows, the Sonic Youth show I went to, I think it was in Shibuya, which is like the big heart of Tokyo. And then at the time, I didn't really know about like the whole smaller venues in Tokyo.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, when I saw uh, Afri Rampo after the show, they were giving out flyers to their next release, um, and it said like you can buy their records at this place called Enban in Koenji. So Koenji is this town, part of Tokyo, which I don't know how to describe it. It's very a lot of punks live there.
Oh, okay.
Um, it's a very kind of psychedelic. It's where a lot of the people that I came to know. A lot of the call and response records people also live in Tokyo, but it's a cultural center of the city
Mm.
for kind of, um, not necessarily mainstream culture, a little bit sort of more underground, um, punk culture, psychedelic culture.
Oh, cool.
Um, it's a really cool place to go. So, but yeah, on the flyer it said, you can get the records at this place called Enban in Koenji. And so I wanted to know more about the band, and so I think it was like the day after I went to Koenji, and I went to Enbon. And Enbon is this very small independent record store. Um, it's like they also do events there.
Okay.
Um, and I think their thing is everything they sell is made by the artist who brings it in.
Okay.
So it's all like handmade CDs and cassettes and stuff like that.
So it's a very kind of DIY, kind of small underground, um, grassroots, I'd say, place
Yeah.
where, yeah, there's no.
Um, yeah, so it's a cornerstone of a lot of the music culture in Koenji and in Tokyo as an extension. And so I went there, and I had never gone to a place like that before.
Mm,
And it kind of blew my mind. And then yeah, I think I found one of Avi Rampo's releases there, and then I ended up buying it. But yeah, that's kind of when I first realized that, oh, a lot of the stuff that I read about Nirvana and a lot of the stuff I read about Sonic Youth,
mm,
there's actually something similar in Tokyo
okay.
that I can kind of actually go and see. So that was the first time I kind of realized that there was this thing that was happening, kind of just right down the street from me, basically.
Yeah, you had your own little kind of movement based. Yeah. Do you remember any shows in particular that kind of inspired you? That you remember that was just like fucking amazing. I mean, any particular venues or around that time? Because you mentioned
Yeah,
Afiram, yeah.
there's a lot. Yeah, the Afri Rampo show for sure. Um, and then that was kind of tail end of high school, and then I started university shortly after that, and I started meeting a lot more musicians at university who are also kind of like-minded. So I met a couple uh, cool people, kind of like my first week, who were in bands. Um, One kid was wearing like a Germs t-shirt,
Okay.
and I was like, dude, that's like, is that the Germs? It was like the blue circle, right?
Yeah.
And so I go up to him and he's like, "Oh, dude, like, is that the Germs?" And he's like, "No one's ever noticed that it was a Germs t-shirt before." So we kind of, we bonded very quickly.
Oh, great.
But yeah, I started meeting people like that, and then some of them already had bands, and some of them were already playing at small venues, so I would go see them. And that's kind of where I started to really get a sense of like this whole community and what venues are, what kinds of venues there are, and that's when I just really started to kind of get into the whole culture. And then through that, I did see um, a couple shows that were really, um, looking back now, they were really important. Um, there was one at this venue called Shibuya Nest, and on the bill it was this band called Mass of the Fermenting Dregs, who are kind of like a alternative rock. Uh, I don't know who to compare them with, but they're fairly straightforward. But they played a really great show that night. And then on the same bill was another band called Panic Smile, who are from Fukuoka, um,
Oh, cool.
which is the southern part of Japan, where there's also a very interesting music scene. If you ever talk to Ian, I think he'll tell you a lot about that scene because it's really fascinating. But yeah,
Yeah.
they're one of the kind of the more influential bands from that part of Japan, and that show was really amazing. Um,
And what
yeah,
kind of stuff do they play? Panic Smile.
it's kind of like Captain Beefheart meets Fugazi, I guess.
That
I don't
sounds
know
incredible. I love Captain
if
Beefheart and Fugazi, so
yeah, I don't know
I'm
if my friends will agree with that comparison, but I think yeah that's probably a good way of describing them. But yeah, just really odd time signatures, but very lots of um, kind of hardcore ethos at the core. Um, yeah, they're a great band.
and I wanted to ask, what did you study at university? Because you said you met some musicians and what?
Right. I was in a liberal arts program, but like in Japan, the way things work is we have these things called circles, so which are basically like clubs.
Okay.
They're kind of extracurricular, you know.
Yeah, societies. Like, yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
And there are a lot of music and band groups.
Mm.
And yeah, just I wanted to join one. I ultimately didn't join one. Ended up forming a band that was not related to any of that stuff, and then we just kind of did our own thing you know, outside of the whole university
Mm.
community.
Mm.
Um, but kind of looking through those groups, I met people. A lot of them, they also ended up doing the same thing. They didn't join these groups, and they formed their own bands, and then they kind of went out into the live scene. Um, but yeah, so I wasn't in like a music program or anything, but um, just meeting people who, a lot of people will join. A lot of people who go to university will join these groups to get access to facilities. Usually, like the school will have like a studio or something like that, or instruments where they can rent and jam.
Oh,
And so
cool.
to take advantage of that, people will join these groups, and then also just to kind of network and meet people. Um, so yeah, that's how I kind of met a lot of people through.
And so, so we could kind of transition to Looprider would be um, when around what time did you kind of start Looprider? I mean, you say it started as like a solo project. Was it after university, like a long time after university, or?
No, it was just a couple of years. So I had a couple groups previous to Looprider, um, and they all failed. Um, like people left, and the big thing for me at the time was I wanted to just be the guitar player. I didn't want to sing or anything like that.
Okay.
And so there was always another singer. But then, the singer always leaves, and then if the singer leaves, then the band, you know, you're not really that band anymore, I suppose.
Mm.
And so after a couple of attempts of that, by that point I was just like, I'll just sing myself, and then that way at least I can keep a group going,
Yeah.
even if
Yeah.
other people leave, maybe.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of like the initial start of it. So this was like 2012. Initially, it was just kind of me messing around, um, trying to put something together. And the idea was to basically create a band where um, I could kind of do a little bit of everything that I wanted to.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, so I wanted it to be heavy. I wanted it to be kind of, you know, do very straightforward rock, but then at the same time also do kind of more avant-garde noise type of stuff, and then kind of everything in between. And so that was kind of the starting point.
And what about the name? I'm interested to know what's the basis of the name Looprider.
Right. So there's a band called Boris, which I don't know if you've heard of them before.
Rings a bell, Boris.
So
Maybe
yeah,
it's
they're
just
they're quite famous. They're quite famous. Oh yeah, not the
I
other
was I
Boris.
just thought, oh God, there's nothing to do with our prime minister. Yeah.
um, yeah. So there's a Japanese band called Boris, who've been around since the 90s. They're very kind of drone metal heavy, heavy band. They're one of my favorite bands of all time. So I started listening to them when I was in high school, when I started discovering a lot of Japanese underground music. Um, and yeah, they're like a heavy band, who they also do like noise and shoegaze, and they also do rock stuff as well. And so they're named after a Melvin song.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So there's a Melvin track called Boris, which is on I think their third record, um, the Bullhead record, the one with the blue cover. so they named themselves after that, but after that song. And they're very much a Melvins inspired band. And then so the name Looprider comes from a Boris song. Um,
Okay.
so the idea is, not that I'm saying we're kind of, shoulder to shoulder with them, but the idea is to kind of like carry on this idea that was from the Melvins, and then kind of paying respect to lineage and history, I guess, is kind
I
of
like
in
that.
kind of my
That's cool. Yeah. I was in a band with my brothers, and we wrote a song. Basically, it ended up sounding just like a song by a band called Q and Not You, who were like part of the Discord Records scene and all that.
yeah.
So we just called the song "We Love Q and Not You" because we were like, well, it just sounds like a Q and Not You song, and we do love Q and Not You, so we'll just call it "We Love Q and Not You," and it's just like, well, it felt like a bit of a like the same, like a paying tribute almost to a band that inspired you.
Yeah,
You know.
that's
So,
cool.
so yeah, Looprider then. I did actually. I think I did actually have a listen to a few of your albums. I'd say Ascension to
Yeah,
me was like really stood out for me. I was like, I'm digging this. What?
cool.
How did you? How do you see your sound and how it's progressed? How it's changed? Would you say it's changed? And how do you feel about where your sound is now? And because it's there's been quite a few album releases and stuff. And
Sure. I don't know. I see it as a kind of a linear trajectory. Like we always just kind of do what we can at the time and whatever we're into.
mm,
Um, we just kind of do the best that we can at the time with, whatever resources we have. Um, so yeah, I mean, when we did that album, I guess I was listening to a lot of, harsh noise, hardcore. Like there's a band called like Struggle for Pride in Japan, who also do kind of this hardcore thing with this kind of white noise on top. Um, so yeah, every time it's just, whatever we're into. I like to do something different each time.
mm,
And I also like to change how we do it. So the kind of the methodology is really important to me too. So like the Ascension album, like it was just me and the drummer, Sean, and we just went in the studio and we didn't decide anything. We were just like, we're gonna go in and then record everything, and then whatever we make, we're gonna put out. So it's very off the cuff and very um, rough. It was fun.
so you mean you actually
Um,
wrote the songs like on the spot in the studio? They weren't.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are all like the second time we ever played those songs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you didn't actually adjust the songs at all. You just literally you wrote it and was like, bang, set record, it's done.
Yeah,
Sort of thing.
basically, yeah. So like, yeah, we didn't have anything planned out, so we went in and I would play like a riff or something, and then we would just figure out, oh, we'll do that part twice, and then this other part twice, and then we'll put it together, and then we'll try it, and then we're like, if it sounds good, then we would record it. So that's what that was. It was just all done in an afternoon. So yeah, that was really fun.
Is that is that how you usually approach things? Do you
N-
how do you
No.
write how do you write the songs then? I mean, is it a collaboration with the other members of the band, or do you write all the songs and then they just play what you want, or how does it?
Yeah, a lot of the time it's like I'll have like a demo of a song and then I'll send it to them, and then the other guys will interpret it in kind of their way. Like for example, like the drums will be like it'll be it'll be sort of mapped out, but then like they'll change like the fill, or like they'll change the beat here and there,
Mm.
uh, and then we'll just like try out together and then see how it sounds in the real world, and then kind of tweak it a little bit.
Mm.
Uh, so I guess the idea kind of starts with me, and then the arrangement's kind of mostly there. Um, but then the other people do, they bring their own flavor into it, and they'll change things. So generally that's how we do it. But then, like the Ascension thing, there are times when, you know, I'll change it up, and it'll just be like, no ideas, let's just go. Um, and then, but yeah, generally it's been kind of lots of like we work on stuff for a long time. And so yeah, it'll be like I'll make a demo, and then I'll send it, and then we'll tweak it, we'll work on it, and then we'll record it, and then
Mm.
we'll listen to it again, and then we'll tweak it again, and then by the time we actually do the final recording, we've already kind of, we've done it a couple times already, and we know exactly what we're going to do. So that's kind of how it generally is.
Mm. Mm. I see. So from the album Ascension up, then your next, it was about 3 years. So as you say, you spend a lot of time working on the material before you actually release anything. What about like shows and gigs? Have you toured outside of Japan, or have you just mostly played in Japan?
No, we haven't played outside of Japan. We've done a couple shows outside of Tokyo, but then
Mm.
mostly it's been in Tokyo. And the big thing with Looprider that I really wanted to um, kind of be I had this idea about shows with the band where um, I wanted it to really be focused around events that we put together,
Mm.
rather than kind of play um, in Japan. How the venue system works is like usually on weekday nights, it's the lineup is booked by the venue. um,
Okay.
and sometimes, I mean, some it depends on the venue, and it depends on the booker as well, but sometimes the bookings are good, and sometimes the bookings aren't so good.
Mm.
And I think there's a lot more not so good than good. So kind of instead of going through all of that, and also there's this kind of pay to play system in Japan.
Mm.
So bands to play a show, they would have to basically, pay money, or the venue will give them tickets, and then if you don't sell them all, you have to pay however much you have left. And so to kind of really, it's kind of like a gambling game. I think it's good for new bands or new musicians who are starting out and they want to network.
Yeah.
But by that point, I had been kind of in the scene for a while.
Yeah.
So instead, I wanted to organize my own events, and I wanted to pick what bands were on the bill and that sort of thing. So um, with Looprider, most of the shows that we've done have been those types of shows.
Yeah. Yeah. So when did you meet Dave McMahon then? So we can talk a bit. How did you meet this crazy guy?
I don't know. I don't exactly remember when I met him. I guess it was before I started this band. Um, but yeah, like Dave was kind of, he was there the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But it's taken a number of years for us to, I think, kind of start really just like talking to each other and exchanging ideas and stuff like that. So I don't exactly remember when I met Dave.
Mm.
But like I mentioned before, like if I go, especially like um, there was a venue in Tokyo called Super Deluxe, where they do a lot of uh, kind of experimental music shows. Like Joe Maruk does a lot of shows there, or did a lot of shows there. And so I would go there to see shows sometimes, and usually if I go, Dave will be there, and
They'll be
so
there.
yeah, we'll have a chat then. And then yeah, also the stuff that he does solo, so Hitodama. I'm a big admirer of Dave, by the way. So like just like the
Yeah,
stuff that he does,
yeah,
I think it's so cool. So yeah, Hitodama, I've seen a few times, and then Justice Christopher, um, I think are really great. And so we actually got them on one of our uh, event rosters once, but yeah, like I don't know, just um, the way Dave, um, I don't know, the way he creates his music, I think it's really inspiring. I think it's also because it's like completely opposite of what I do. Um, and so that appeals to me greatly.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and yeah, just you know, like I mentioned before, we're both connoisseurs of effects pedals
mm.
and guitars, and so
Yeah,
I think ultimately we both share this interest of plugging in a bunch of effects pedals into as many amplifiers as possible. So yeah, there's a lot that it's a lot of unspoken kinship there, I think. But yeah,
yeah,
I admire Dave a lot.
yeah. For me, what stands out with Dave is like his energy. He just has
Yeah,
this like energy that's like just so um, kind of appealing. I suppose I can't think of the right word, but he's totally fully committed to what he's doing, and he's projecting this energy. And like I did actually when I was in Japan last year, and he I was very grateful that he let me play with his band, Justice Christopher. And I played with him before a long time ago. We used to come back to the UK for Christmas and play shows. And I just always remember he was just fully committed to what he was doing. He didn't give a shit about what people thought. He was just like, I'm just going to put up this wall of noise and just project it out. And, you know, if you like it, great. If you don't care. And it was like that kind of confidence was like, that's always what sticks out. And he's fist pumping. He does the fist pumping stuff, which I really like. So, but what in terms of like obviously current days we can't really do much musically like play gigs or anything. And what's your kind of ambitions for the band for the Looprider for the future, and what would you like to maybe play outside of Japan and maybe do a European tour so we can play in the UK?
yeah, I think yeah, I'd be very interested in playing on taking the band outside of Japan.
Mm.
We've talked about it before. I mean, obviously, a lot of there's a lot of history of cool bands from Japan touring outside of the country, and you know, arguably being recognized outside of the country more. Um, so yeah, like you know, bands like Boredoms and Shonen Knife and Melt Banana and Boris and all these bands. It's something that we would like to try if we can. Obviously, we can't do it now.
Mm.
But yeah, that's something I think, um, yeah, it's certainly a goal of mine that I'd like to do. And then I don't know, in terms of the immediate future though, I don't know, it's a weird time right now. Like, um, my friends are, you know, some of my friends are playing shows in Tokyo, even now. I think for us, we've decided that right now is probably not a good time.
Mm.
So we've just been, you know, working on, you know, new music. But um, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in exploring other ways of doing shows, whether they be virtual um, or live streams or whatever.
Mm.
So that's something I'm keen on trying maybe this year. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird time to be in a band for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, so did you ever entertain the thought of playing outside of Japan before? Because you have been, Looprider, as you say, has been sort of around since 2012, did you say? But then obviously became the band a bit later. Was there ever a point where you were looking into, hopefully, well, were you looking into playing abroad? It's been around 10 years, hasn't it? So.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's just because of work commitments and other life commitments of
Yeah,
some of the other band members that it's just logistically it's just hard to put together.
sure. Yeah.
So we've talked about it. Also, it's just like should we book it ourselves or should we kind of get someone to help us out and stuff like that? Like I've had friends who have done tours in like the US and stuff like that, but um yeah, just I guess yeah, just for whatever reason we were never able to find, we weren't ever to secure time or whatever to do it. I have played in another band uh, outside of Japan before. We did a tour in Canada
Okay.
with a bunch of other Japanese bands. But yeah, um, and also, I think just like like for example, like paperwork and visas and stuff like that, if you want to,
Mm,
do it legit,
yeah.
um, it's a whole other thing. And then, the risks of doing it not legit
Mm,
is a whole other thing as well.
yeah.
But yeah, and I think it's become increasingly harder for smaller artists and bands to tour outside of their country.
Mm.
Um, so
I mean, financially, it's more than likely you're not going to make any money. You probably lose a lot of money. More like, I mean, you might sell a lot of merchandise, but I think overall you'll probably be down by a lot of money.
yeah,
Uh, it's
I mean,
yeah,
I've
mm,
yeah, and I've even heard of kind of sort of well-known bands having trouble, um, who have toured like the US dozens of times, and hearing some of those bands having, like, for example, if they're doing like a US Canada tour, they get stopped at the border for Canada and then they have to go home or they can't continue the tour. Like there were stories like this.
mm,
Uh, and I've been hearing more of these types of stories, I think, over the last couple of years. So
yeah,
I think it's
yeah,
it's really getting tough, yeah.
yeah, definitely. Well, we're coming up to the hour now, so if we can kind of wrap it up, and just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck with the band, and hopefully I will be coming to Japan again at some point, and we can meet up and maybe go to some shows, and yeah. But thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, please, next time you're here, let me know.
Will do.
We
Yeah,
can hang out in Koenji and with Dave and
with Dave in. Yeah.
uh all the rest of the gang. So yeah, let me know.
Okay. Thank you, Rio. Thank you so much.